All right, welcome back everyone to another weekly edition of Stock Market Mutterings for the week ending on February 18th. And I'm going to take a grope in the murkiness and try to find you the very best trade ideas for the week that I can. Now, we've had some good stuff lately that we've talked about in these mutterings. We had Tesla, we had Nvidia, which was the really big workhorse winner for us this week, Roku, but we've seen some expanded ranges and some really nice moves in this market since bouncing off of the 200 moving average on a daily chart, which we'll talk about in just a second. As always, if you need help, visit thelincolnlist.com. We'll do what we can. Trade with us live each day. So let's just start out right here. Let's talk about the SPY. It's like Rocky Balboa up off of the mat. All right, enough of the silliness, but let's just kind of focus in here on a chart. We talked about that last week. We left off with the 200 moving average bounce right here on this blue line on my daily chart down at the bottom. That's the first time that the market showed some interest from the sell-off starting on the 26th of January. You had a couple of big flushes, hits that 200 moving average, kind of expected a bounce, but it got into a point here where it was doing a little bit of a V-shaped rally. Right here, you can kind of see it just kind of starts back up here. From Monday on, it just kept clicking and clicking like it was the old times. There was a little bit of volatility that we had on Monday and on Tuesday, but by Wednesday, it was like back to feeling like the old days where stocks were just melt, 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 melt. Very little pullbacks. You saw some just straight out grinds. And at this point, it seemed pretty evident there about midday Wednesday that this thing wanted to attack the 50 moving average on the daily chart. If you take a look here, this red line on the bottom chart, it's a 50 moving, simple moving average on the daily chart. It looked like it was going to hit that, and it did. And in fact, it traded through that. I felt that we'd probably get a slowdown or some point of resistance there or some kind of rejection. Really didn't. It just kind of melted right on through that. And as we got just, if you look a little close here on that bottom chart as well, that green line, there's the 20 moving average. So it actually came from the 200 back to the 20 moving average, retraced about 50% for the fibs out there. Those people like the fibs. About 50%, retraced about 50% of the sell-off and closed just slightly under the 20 moving average. So you already see that. Hindsight's 2020. What are we going to do? What are we going to talk about now going forward? I think if you're looking for a rally to go back up to 280s, maybe reattack all-time highs, if something like that's going to happen, I think the best bet for everyone where you can get the maximum kind of range and the very best opportunities is going to be on a little bit of a back test. And meaning this thing comes back just a little bit. Take a few days off because you got to understand this. For the Dow, it's 1,000 plus some points here. This is 253 to 273, so it retraces 20. That's pretty steep there on the SPY. Look for this 50 moving average to set the tone for the remainder of the week. That's roughly 271.50. See if that gets down in there early Monday or possibly gaps below. If it gaps below and the market starts to bounce, look for that 271.50. If you start to see fades, look for that 271.50. See if that comes into play. See how this market reacts around that 50 moving average if they decide to use that as an anchoring point for the rest of the week. Now, if we fade underneath that, you've got to be looking, let's say you start out the week with selling, you've got to be looking at between 268 and then the retracement of the support that takes out basically Tuesday and Wednesday's lows of 264.70s. So right now, if we're looking at the bottom, if you see some retracement, see if it can hold that 50 moving average, which is relatively close. Underneath of that, you've got a few levels about 267 and 263.5 that you need to worry about if it goes lower. If it continues to just grind, I mean, there really isn't any resistance in the chart. I mean, you're free and clear of most of the moving averages here. If you start going up, we start hitting grinding, I mean, you know, throw the pin right there on 280. I mean, that's the target that you'd be looking for. But we'll see what happens. I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. We're going to figure it out, though, as the week goes on. So let's now move to individual stocks that can help you guys make some money. As I said, Nvidia has been the workhorse this week for us. It's historically been somewhat of a sketchy bastard to trade because it's always had some sort of issues. And there's been times it's been trendy, and there's other times it's just been schizophrenic. That's just what comes along with this stock. But lately, it's been pretty good, especially this week. It's been very, very strong. What I want to focus on here is looking yet again at the daily chart. This 248.50, it just snuck its way up in there into an all-time high breakout and just kind of crested that and rolled over early in the morning. Now, the interesting thing that we noticed in our trade room is, I'm only going back like 3 or 4 days here, but look at this thing. Every single day, this thing pops right at the open. Check these out. It just rips at the open, flat lines. Rips at the opens. This day where we had to melt on Wednesday, it continued to run. Thursday, same thing. Rip at the open, pull. Friday, rip at the open, pull. You see, that's every single day this thing takes off in the morning. And not just takes off, it just clocks up some serious green bars. I mean, it's just green bar, green bar, green bar, green bar. Goes vert on Friday. I mean, it's like 5 straight days of vertness in that thing. Now, I don't know if that pattern continues, but when you look at stuff like this and you see patterns, that tells you what kind of, that's how you make money trading stocks when you're using technical analysis. You just continue to ride that early morning momentum and then fade it later if that's your setup. Setting aside all of that, that's a big level up there. If the market stays strong, if we continue to see upward momentum, maybe even a sideways market, not a lot of panic or selling, look for that thing to get up there and at least try to test it one more time and possibly roll into 260. That remains to be seen, but this one looks pretty good up there. Now, another one that looks kind of similar to this would be BA. I know these are expensive stocks, but these things actually operate very well in their environments. Here's another one. It's the same thing as NVIDIA. You're up here tapping on these highs of 360.20, I think 360.30, somewhere in that neighborhood. Kind of the same thing like I keep saying with NVIDIA. If the market's going to continue to drive up and continue to melt or continue to push up, look for these stocks to take. I mean, they're just parked right up there at all-time highs on the daily chart. You should get some good cash flow moves as soon as those things break, if they do. Now, if the market starts selling off and these things retrace, no, these ideas are out the window. You'd have to possibly look at fading them. But you're at some pretty significant levels with both BA and NVIDIA, where you're breaking 52 and all-time highs on daily charts here. So you should see some pretty strong moves if we decide to be strong. Now, if we don't, I mean, they could still break out in a sideways market or even a down market. But if there is some panic, now these trades are off the table, I'd look for possibly dip buying these or even fading them if they have any kind of verts going throughout the day. So NVIDIA and BA kind of look the same. You might even want to throw this GBT, Global Blood, in here. It's kind of the same thing. It's poking around its highs as well. Now, the interesting thing about this stock is while the market was getting sold pretty heavy, this kind of avoided any of that damage. Yes, it had some red days in there you can see on the daily chart, but for the most part, this thing held up really well. I mean, it's held up. So, look for this thing to try to re-gear and come back up over top of 65.50. This could be a nice little long for a breakout. Now, one of the things I'm noticing with this is starting to lack range. You got back here in January, this thing had some pretty good candles and some pretty good range with it. But lately we've seen here, in the last 4 days, while the market's grinded up, yes, it's made an upward move, but it's only been a couple of bucks on a $60 stock. There might be an issue with that range. We're going to have to look at it if the alert triggers and then go from there and see whether this thing has enough volume to push that up there and whether it's worth your time. Maybe it's something that fits more along the lines of a swing trade or something like that rather than a day trade. But I've noticed the chart looks well, but there could be a possible lack of range. Now, I'm going to give you one here I think is a pretty good short idea, and that would be the old Sedge Solar Edge here. This is a big one coming out from earnings. Bouncing. It was already bouncing 3 days prior to earnings. So this thing's made a move from 32 to 46. Pretty good for this stock. It started to slow itself down a lot on Friday. We were kind of looking for a big vert open on Friday to get short towards 50, but it didn't do that. The way I like to short is I don't like to short stocks just because they go up a lot. I think I've made that clear a lot before, but for the first-time listeners, that's the way I'd like to do it. I like to see some vertical moves in the morning, some overbought indicators and stuff like that. Then I go short. When you get something like this that's starting to grind, that completely changes the complexion of the way the stock operates. So I would like to see, if I want to short this, I would like to see one more pop. So let's say we do gap up on Monday. There's a lot of bullish activity. We're not working on Monday. Excuse me, I'm sorry. But let's say that it gaps up the next day that we do work. and then it goes vertical and you start to get a big push, then we'll take a look at it, maybe possibly 50. It has to line up. Again, that's one of the things when you do a watch list or something and you go through all of these stocks, you think you got some ideas, you put them down here, and maybe, you know, a quarter of them out of all the ones that you put up will work. You know, when you're talking about these, they gotta meet their trigger points. You know, the NVIDIA, BA have got to break out. You got to have solid volume and somewhat of a market direction bias. Same way with GBT. Sedge here has to pop up a little bit. And who knows what's going to happen? I mean, that's one of the beauty things about trading. You come up with ideas, you do your chart work, but then there's all of this stuff that just rolls right out. If you're patient, just comes up, news events, spikes, paras, buyout rumors, flushes, all kinds of good stuff. And that's why we sit here and look at it all day. So anyway, I'm going to stop it right there. You guys need some help. It's thelincolnlist.com. Visit the trade room. We trade live on screen. Let's see if this market has any more juice to go to the upside. Let's see if it just goes flat. Let's see if it sells off. Who knows? But we're prepared for any direction. As always, take care. Until the next one, see you then.